All right, hello algebra. We are back and we are going to finish up how to factor with a leading coefficient. So let's go ahead and jump to our notes. Number one. All right, so the first thing you got to look at is each of these terms. So all of these problems are a little bit more challenging than yesterday because right off the bat it doesn't have a GCF. But today they might. So that's the first thing I'm going to look for is when I'm looking at number one, well, is there a number that divides 2, 8, and 10? Well, yeah, they're all even. So I'm going to divide each of these by 2 first, just so we know that we can take out that GCF. So now I have y equals x squared plus 4x minus 5. And that makes this process 10 times easier because I don't have to find the GCF later. So now that we have a coefficient of 1, we already know what to do. So you find that last term. So you have 5. Well, what numbers multiply to get you 5? 1 and 5. Our goal is for them to add to 4. Well, keep in mind this is a negative 5, so that means either the 1's negative or the 5 is negative. Well, if we want a positive 4, that means our 1's going to be negative. So I've got x minus 1, x plus 5. And remember, that equals 0, okay, because that's from our zero product property. So what we can do now is kind of break each of these terms up. So we have x minus 1 equals 0, and x plus 5 equals 0. So we can find our set of solutions. So to solve for x for our first one, you add 1 on both sides. And to solve for our second one, you add 5 on both sides. These cancel out. You have x equals 1. Oh, hold up. Let's just fix this mistake. We do not add 5 to both sides because it's already a plus 5. We need to subtract 5. My bad. I can't believe I almost let that happen. So now they cancel out. So x gets you negative 5. So our set of solutions here is just x equals our set of 1 and negative 5. So there's our answer. So now let's look at number 2. Well, is there a number that divides 10, 1, and 2? Not quite. So we need to go back and do what we did yesterday to factor it. So first step, we take our a and we multiply it by our c. So that's 10 times negative 2. That gives us a negative 20. And our goal is for it to add up to 1. So let's look. Factors of 20. Let's see. We've got 1 and 20. We've got 2 and 10. And we have 5 and 4. So if our goal is for them to be 1, well, 1 and 20 is never going to get me 1, like ever. So that's out of here. 2 and 10, once again, never going to give me 1, but 5 and 4 will. So if our goal is to get a positive 1, we know that this 4 will be negative to get that positive 1. So remember, this is different from when a has a leading coefficient of 1. So we have a first. So we have 10x and then something, and then 10x and then something. We already found those somethings, so that's our plus 5 and our minus 4. Keep in mind that equals 0. So our next step is let's see what divides both of these things. So if we look, we have 10 and we have 5. Well, we know that 5 divides both of those. So our new problem will be our 2x plus 1. And then we have to do that same step to our other one. We have 10 and 4. Well, what number divides that? Well, 2 does. 2 does. So that will get us 5x minus 2. Well, let's go ahead. We know that this entire equation, or quadratic, is set equal to 0. So we're going to do that same process we did before, where we have 2x plus 1 equals 0, and 5x minus 2 equals 0. So if we go back and we try to solve these, well, this is just solving equations, 2 steps. First step, we have to move over our constant, so minus 1 on both sides. So these cancel out. So we have 2x equals negative 1. Well, now we have to get rid of that 2, and because it's multiplying, we have to do the opposite. So we have to divide each side by 2. So this x equals negative 1/2. On this side, we have to do that same process. Move over that 2 first. So plus 2 on both sides, so these cancel out. So we have 5x equals 2. Well, now the same thing, we have to get rid of that 5. So because it's multiplying, divide, and x equals 2/5. So our set of solutions for this problem is x is negative 1/2 and 2/5. That's our set of solutions. All right, there's our first two. Number 3, I'm going to cross out because it doesn't even have a leading coefficient. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that one and just jump straight into number 4. So as you can see with our standard form, that our formula has to be equal to 0. In this problem, it's not. We have to move over this 27. So because it's positive, we're going to subtract that 27. So our new formula will have 2x squared minus 15x minus 27. So that's the formula we're going to use. And keep in mind, it equals 0. So because it has the leading coefficient of 2, you need to take 2 and 27 and multiply them. Well, 2 times negative 27 gets us a negative 54. And our goal is for it to add up to negative 15. Well, let's go ahead and list some factors of 54. We have 1 and 54, duh. And we've got 2 and 27. We've got 3 and 18. And lastly, we got 6 and 9. So if our goal is to get 15, well, we know that 1 and 54 is never going to give us 15. 2 and 27 is not going to give us 15. But let's look at 3 and 18. That will give us 15. But which one is going to be negative? Keep in mind we want a negative 15. So our 3 will be positive and our 18 will be negative. So let's go ahead and plug that back into our original. Remember, it starts with our a. So we have 2x plus 3. And then we've got 2x minus 18. Well, my next step is to see, okay, well, what is the GCF? Can I take out a GCF? Well, if we look at our first part, 2x plus 3, there's not a number that divides 2 and 3. So that's going to stay the same. We have 2x plus 3. My second one, though, I can divide both of these by 2. So I'll have x minus 9. And as we know, this is set equal to 0. And our last step is to solve for x. So we have 2x plus 3 equals 0. And we have x minus 9 equals 0. Well, let's go ahead and solve for x. Got to subtract 3 first. So we have 2x equals negative 3. Divide by 2 on both sides. So my first solution is negative 3/2. That's a 2. And now over here, we got to do the same thing by solving for x by adding 9 on both sides. So that'll get us x equals 9, and that's our second number in our set of solutions. So that's negative 3/2 and 9. So that's number 4. A lot of work, but keep in mind I also write really big. All right, we have 2 more that I want to do. I'll do 5 with you, and you'll try 6 by yourself. So let's go ahead and look at number 5. As you can see, it's not in the regular ax squared plus bx plus c form, so we need it to look like that. So let's distribute that x through. So we will have 4x squared plus 1x and then equals 5. Remember, our goal is for it to equal 0, so we need to subtract 5. So our quadratic here is 4x squared plus 1x minus 5 equals 0. So now let's go ahead and factor. Remember, you take your first and your last, your a and your c, and you multiply them. So you've got negative 20, and our goal is to get 1. Well, factors of 20, we're going to use 5 and 4. Okay, so you guys can list them all out, but I think you guys are getting a good practice of that. So 5 and 4, and we know that my 4 will be negative. So let's go ahead and plug it in. We have 4x plus 5. Then we have 4x minus 4. Remember, we start with this 4x because that's our a here. So now we got to see, well, does these numbers have a GCF? Do they divide at all? Well, in our first one, there is not a number that divides 4 and 5. So we'll still have 4x plus 5. But our second one, 4 divides 4. So we'll have x minus 1. We'll have x minus 1. Well, let's go ahead and set this equal to 0 so we can solve it. So we have 4x plus 5 equals 0, and we have x minus 1 equals 0. Well, if we solve our first one, you have to subtract first. So you have 4x equals negative 5. Then you got to divide that 4. So our first answer is negative 5/4. And then our second one, you have to add 1. Don't have to divide, so x equals 1 here. And our set of solutions, just meaning multiple answers, is negative 5/4 and 1. All right, so number 6 is almost identical to number 5. So pause this video, give it a shot, and then check your answer. All right, this is what you should have gotten for number 6. So your first step was to distribute that x through, and you'd get 15x squared plus x minus 2. Next thing you got to do is multiply your a times c. 15 times negative 2 gives us a negative 30. So I listed my factors of negative 30, and our goal is to get 1. Well, as you can see, we've got negative 5 and 6. That gives us our 1. So you go ahead and plug that in with our 15x. So after you do that step, you find if there is a GCF in either of those factors. As you can see, for the first one, the GCF was 5, and our second one was 3. So we multiply those ones, we divide those two, and then we set them equal to 0. So after we set them equal to 0, we have to solve for x. So you can see my steps of adding or subtracting the number and then dividing. As you can see, our final answer is x equals 1/3 and negative 2/5. If you got that incorrect and need further explanation on it, just raise your hand and we can come help you out. All right, go ahead and jump to your worksheet and let us know if you need some help. Adios.